crazy. So, okay. So I've organized these as annuals, perennials, trees and shrubs, and then we'll go into like the edibles at the end. Although some of those edibles kind of flow into the annuals and perennials. So I'll kind of get those out of the way. But we're going to kind of start with annuals. And for those of you that may be new to gardening, they complete their life cycle within a year. So they grow from seed, they put their leaves on, they put their flowers on, and then they die in a year. So we have summer annuals that bloom all summer, and then we have winter annuals that kind of bloom from fall until early or late spring. So that's kind of where our annuals come from. So let me get the caveats out of the way. All the descriptions and photos that you see in this presentation come from the garden centers and the nurseries and things that produce these plants. So it might be that they may be a little exaggerated. So take the descriptions with a little bit of grain of salt. They come directly from the catalogs and their websites. So they really want to sell you plants. So I'm going to try and be very upbeat and honest with you. I have not grown any of these plants because they're new and they're new on the market for this year. So hopefully you'll try them out. I know gardeners are great experimenters and they love new things. So I just wanted to kind of show you a variety of new plants that you might see in your garden center or that you may request from your garden center to see. So we'll kind of start with the annuals, as I said, and this is Celosia. And I think people understand Celosia as that big plume. There's a plume Celosia, and then there's like a brain, it looks like a brain, basketball sized brain that you can have, Celosia. But this one's actually grown for its foliage. This one's called Gecko Green. It gets about 10 to 14 inches tall with about that size wide. As you can see here, it looks great in a pot. It needs full sun. It does like to bring some color and texture to your containers. So this would be a great filler in a container. It's the flower on it, not so good. So we don't really want to see those flowers. We want to pick those out and do a better job of not using those flowers. But it needs full sun. I may have said that before, but it looks good on a patio or a deck if you've got a small spot. And it looks good in the front of a board, like a shrub border, or it can be kind of a greeny, purpley accent into your flower beds. But again, it's an annual, so you're going to have to plant this one year after year. And you can get the slide deck, is what we call it, from the website, because what you want to do if you want to like look for some of these plants is to like use the scientific name, which is what I put kind of up the top. I'm sorry, the scientific name's at the bottom and the common name's at the top, and you can use both of those to kind of Google your plants if you want to look for these. Coleus is one of those plants that we use all the time, but we think about for shade. Well, several years ago, they've kind of gone back to breeding into some of those sun tolerances. And this one's called Mad Medusa. It's very short. It only gets about 9 inches tall, but it gets kind of wide. It's about 18 inches wide. Will tolerate sun and part shade. In part shade, it'll get a little bit darker green. It's upright, this little moundy greeny, I call them green meatballs, but they look really good on a container in the landscape, and that'll give you just that little pop of color that you see out here. And I put the photo credits on there. So this one's from Terra Nova Nurseries, and you could probably find that on their website. I know the succulents are all the rage, but this is called painted Echeveria. Now, granted, Latin is a language that we no longer speak, so I may pronounce it a little different than you are. But these are only hardy to like zone 11, so they're not really hardy for us, but it would make a really good houseplant. It's commonly grown in containers because it needs really sharp drainage. And those rosettes can get up to, here, oops, I thought I had my laser pointer. These rosettes can get about 6 to 8 inches across. So you're looking at, and then they put all these little pups out. These are not quite old enough to put out little pups, but these can be kind of great to put on a container or in a container on a table. And then in late summer, they will put up a flower stalk for you. It's not very interesting flower stalk. It just has some little flowers on it. But this was I love the colors on these leaves. They're great kind of talking points. Fishbone cactus, I'm not sure that we can get here, but I was very intrigued with the shape of these leaves. But this one is from the UK. It's unique and intriguing. It originates from the rainforest in Mexico. And it's famous for its long flat stems, which look like fish bones. And it's very easy to care and low maintenance. So what you're looking at is something that can be a houseplant in the fall and winter. Similarly, care as like a Christmas cactus or a Thanksgiving cactus for us. Proven Accents Sweet Caroline is a sweet potato. It's a bushy sweet potato. You think about those long purple plants that we usually find in hanging baskets. Well, this one you can plant in the ground, and this one is actually this right here. This is Sweet Caroline. It's a great foliage companion in your pots or in your garden. Has great heat tolerance and good vigor. It has a crown shaped and this very fine finger foliage. They're more mounded and less traily, which is pretty unique and fun. It can substitute for a Boston fern in a basket that may like more sun. It doesn't get very long. It's only about 12 inches tall and may trail up to 30 inches. It's green. It has a little bit of purple accent on its new growth, but then it'll turn green as it starts to age. Very easy to grow. You can take cuttings in the fall if you want to kind of overwinter it, but you can overwinter it as a houseplant if you so choose. It'll tolerate some shade for that. And this one will make a really good ground cover if you've got an open spot in your garden that you just need to fill something with. It doesn't really need a whole lot of fertilizer, and sometimes I know the fertilizer requirements and not. They will make a sweet potato if you leave them in the ground long enough, but it won't taste very good. It's not a sweet potato, and it wasn't bred to be a sweet potato, but you could save it and plant it again next year as part of your garden overwintering, which I like about sweet potato vines. This is I love the Mangrave. It's a cross between a Manfreda and an agave. So it's an intergenetic cross. It's a rare hybrid. It has both better growth rate and an interesting spotting of Manfreda and the habit and refinement of agave. These tight dark green leaves stay curled upward with a teardrop shape, and they have those cinnamon brown spines, which kind of outline those leaves. And Praying Hands gets their habit from its agave parent, I should say. I don't know if it's the mother or the father, but it's a parent. The plants are under 12 inches tall, so these are pretty small plants. They do okay in containers. They do great in beds, but they do need some good drainage. Heat tolerant, of course, rain tolerant, wind tolerant. It's a tender perennial, so it's only hardy to zone 10, which is not us. That's Florida. So you'll have to bring it in the winter if you would like to keep it from year to year. But I think because it's an agave and a Manfreda, it would make a pretty good house plant too. But those are not as big as you think they are in the picture. Now this is basil. This is Emerald Towers basil. And basically it's an edible. This one you can eat. So I was tempted to put it in annuals or put it into our edible section. I wasn't sure. It's a Thai basil, but it gets 6 to 12 inches tall, and it gets about, wide, 8 to 12 inches wide and 36 inches tall. So it's more the columnar type growth habit, which is kind of fun. You can extend your harvest with multiple cuts. It does a really good job. I think it'd be great on a patio if you needed like a little tiny visual barrier as like a tiny hedge or a 3-foot tall hedge. It does make some really good cooking. It has that aromatic, sorry, I can't read today, and vibrant licorice flavor, especially with Thai cuisine. Blends well when cooked in a curry. I'm not a big curry fan, but that sounds awesome. Now it's just making me hungry for lunch. It needs normal care of basil, full sun, a little bit of fertilizer, probably just once a month will be fine. You don't want to push the fertilizer on it because then it'll be spindly and it won't taste very good. Herbs kind of do better when they're on the lean side. But this is Emerald Towers, which I think people can get very creative with this shape of plant in their garden. You could put it in your flower bed and give you little spikes of green where you may not have green before. Again, we're in the annual, so it's only going to be there for a season. This is Amazing Gray Poppy, which I thought was a very interesting color of poppies. This one came from Eden Brothers. Definitely an annual, but it's a winter annual. So you're going to plant this in the fall. It's going to overwinter as a little rosette, and it's going to bloom early in the springtime. It's related to the Oriental poppies that we grow here in the spring. Gets about 18 to 24 inches tall. It does well in containers. It does well in beds. It's very cold tolerant because it needs that cold temperature to bloom. But I love the color. And it has that very crepey paper blooms. They might even be, this one looks like it's a half double, but sometimes they'll put out single blooms on each flower stalk. It's a pretty much carefree annual. It's a pollinator favorite because look at all those little stamens. Those bees are really going to like that pollen. And they can reseed to make them ideal for naturalized areas. This one came out in 2018 as a novelty award winner from Floral Select. So that's the European All-American selections that they have. So I'll talk about All-American selections when we get to that point. Cape Fuchsia, as much as pretty as these plants are, they are definitely annuals in our area. This one's more of a subby shrub, half-hardy shrub. It's not half-hardy, it's not hardy here at all. But it has some really good looking foliage. It has that little droopy flower, and it comes in all these different colors. They produce tubular flowers. I think these would be great if you have a lot of hummingbirds. It flowers from the summer through autumn. And if you can overwinter it, it'll get even bigger and bigger. It does like a little bit of a protected area from wind and rain, but it will get about 24 inches tall either way, or tall and wide on either selection. Let's see. This, I'm not even going to, Plectranthus. I don't even know if there's a common name for this one, but I was really intrigued with all the different flower colors. So we have Velvet Lady, we have Diva, here's Idol, which is a lighter purple, and then Elvis, Velvet Elvis, which I thought was hilarious. And sometimes I pick these plants just for the names. So here's Velvet Elvis in a pot, who looks pretty good. Again, these are those tubular flowers that hummingbirds will love, even though they're not red. But again, not hardy. But this one will tolerate shade, whereas the Cape Fuchsias really liked the sun. These you can put into a shade garden to give you a little pop of color. It tends to bloom fairly late in the season, probably September, October timeframe. We might want to bump that back to August. But this one needs a little bit of shade. It does get about 21 inches tall and wide. Let's see. It does like a rich humus soil and a pH between 5.6 and 6.5. So just a normal garden soil. It says special uses in the deep south. So we're not deep south, but we're kind of south. It doesn't need any extra waterings. It can dry out between waterings. It looks good in a container, and it looks great as a house plant. So you can bring this one in, and it may not flower as much, but it will continue to flower through the year. And as long as the day and night temperatures are between 60 and 80 degrees, you're good to go. So this is Velvet Diva and Velvet Elvis, which I thought was hilarious. I had never seen Andean silver leaf sage, but I thought it was a very interesting addition to our gardens. Again, not a perennial, it's an annual. So it's one of those that you have to replace every year. But likes morning sun, partial sun, part shade, full sun in cool, humid summer climates. We don't have a cool, humid summer climate. We have a hot summer climate. So I would put this one in the shade a little bit. But the contrast between those silvery leaves and that really darky purple flower is really, really striking. It flowers summer to fall throughout the season. You can fertilize in the spring once growth starts until midsummer. but you want to put these out after the danger of frost. So after a frost-free date, which is about the 1st of May, you should be able to do pretty well with this plant. It's originally from Mexico, so it does really need those hot summers a little bit for us. It gets about 2 to 3 feet high and wide, and it has that really contrasting silver foliage with that dark purple flowers. So we'll see. I might try to find this one and put this one in my garden because I think it'll be a great addition. And I love pansies in all its forms. So here's Viola Magnificent, sweetheart. Did you know pansies had a flower scent? If you didn't, now you do. These are hardy very well for us. We plant them in September. We let them grow through the winter, and in the spring they just pop all their little flowers out. I tend to fertilize mine kind of towards after I plant them in the fall, and then I stop. I don't plant them in the field, but I like the fact that they've kind of got this little purple edge on them that kind of veins into the yellow. And you can see this if we don't have any snow in amongst the browns of the mulches, and they look pretty good that way. It has a fragrant pale lemon blooms with lavender purple margins. It's almost a lemony scent, but not quite. It has its own kind of scent. This one performs well in cool, moist, shady areas. Although farther north, it can tolerate full sun. And in the winter, I put it in full sun, it does just fine. Most of my shade is gone because the leaves are off the trees. So this is kind of an interesting color combination for these pansies without that dark purple, that dark eye on there. And then just to add another pansy to the mix, I put Beacon Rose was in there. I kind of enjoyed it because of the white standards in the back, and then the face is mostly pink. It's usually a unique color that you don't usually find in the industry very much. So, okay, that ends our annual talk. So all of these next plants I'm going to talk about are perennials. Allegedly, perennials last for at least 3 years in the garden before they start to poop out, or they last for 50 years. And there's no telling because those plants don't read the books. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So we'll kind of start early. And I will say, I love columbine because they're so pretty in the spring. This one, the Early Bird series, has individual flower colors that you can buy. So if you like purple, you can buy the purple one. But columbine is what's considered a short-lived perennial. It'll live usually for 2 or 3 years as a perennial, and then it'll seed out, and you should get new plants from that. But these are hybrids, so you don't really want to keep the seeds because you won't get the same plants back after that indiscriminate, what do they call it, indiscriminate pollination for that. So columbine early birds come in 4 or 5 different colors. We've got a yellow and a red, a purple and a blue, I think they call that. Here's a red and a white, and a blue and a white, and a purple and a yellow. And they get about 12 inches tall, but with about a 10-inch spread. They do, you can plant them early in the springtime. They do a pretty good job. New colors, this might spark a new interest in Aquilegia, if you want to pronounce the scientific name. Took me a while to get that one. You can actually harvest these as cut flowers. They last about a week in a vase if you do them right and you cut them in the morning. Although I'd probably get a little bit taller selection than these to put in a cut flower in a vase. But I love the columbines. And columbines are native, actually. Another one that people don't really realize is it's called pig squeak, and it's Virginia cordifolia. We had one of these at our old office. And the reason it's called pig squeak is if you take the leaves, fold them up on each other, and you rub them together, it squeaks like a pig. That's how they got named. So Miss Piggy is a new variety of pig squeak. It attracts bees and butterflies. It really does well in a shady garden. But they have these huge, thick, dark, glossy leaves that's evergreen. So they're there all the time, usually in the fall. It gets about 18 inches tall with the flowers, but the spread is about 32 inches. So you're going to get a pretty big plant. It does well in containers from the picture. It's a great filler I've even cut the leaves as I needed a a filler in a vase because they're so huge. They do a fairly good job of doing that. It's not picky on soil pH or fertilizer. It does like a little bit of shade in the heat of our summers. It does look, if we get a big drought, go ahead and water it. It really has these really dark pink leaves, or sorry, flowers. There's one called Apple Blossom that has kind of a white flower on it that you can try too, but we'll try Miss Piggy because she's got these really bright pink flowers on there. Oh, I need to start moving on here. Clematis. Now there's a couple of different types of clematis. This is a vining clematis. But if blue clematis isn't your, vine and you're tired of trying to, I try to grow that red one all the time and it just keeps dying on me. So I'm going to try these other ones. Here's Sparky, the Sparky series. We've got Sparky Purple down here and Sparky Pink. The pink one kind of has nodding flowers on it. And then Sparky Blue has more upright, outward facing flowers. It blooms earlier in the spring than other clematis. It looks like a pinwheel of colorful petals around a fluffy yellow center. And it has that typical clematis seed pod. Let's see. It grows in a trellis because it gets 72 to 96 inches tall. So I believe that's 6 to 8 feet tall. And the thing about clematis is this one is allegedly disease resistant. So I might be able to try it because I think I've got a disease in my soil. It's no pruning needed, allegedly. So like I said, there's caveats to this. It blooms on old wood. So if you need to prune it up, you need to prune it after it flowers or you're going to be pruning off all your flower buds. They do need support from the time that they're planted onward. And you can't make it go around a 4-inch stake. You need to kind of give it, because it uses its little petioles to climb. So it needs a little bit of a structure. Let's see, blooms on old wood. So the other clematis, this one also needs its feet in the shade and its head in the sun. So it'll grow really fast up tall so that it can reach that sun. But it really would like some shade on its roof. So if you plant it at the bottom of a shrub or something that'll cool that soil off, it'll do fairly well for you. So here's Clematis Sparky, and then here's Little Lemons. I like the ground cover type clematis because they don't look like clematis. And Little Lemons was selected because it's an extraordinarily dwarf clematis. In the Netherlands where it was bred, it draws bees and bumblebees to the flowers. Let's see, let's see. Hardy to zone 5, so we're good there. It only gets 18 to 24 inches tall. The foliage is that bright green. It has a yellow to orange flower. Let's see. It's pollinator friendly. It does not like particularly wet soils or dry soil. So it's kind of that, Goldilocks zone of moisture. So you may need to water it a couple of times in the summertime when it gets really dry here. It says prune in the spring before active growth begins, and prune back to previous year stems to a pair of healthy buds, as this is a late flowering variety. So it probably doesn't bloom until mid or late summer, but I don't know. It didn't tell me. So there's Clematis Little Lemons. Cheddar Pinks, if you're not into dianthus, this one actually has a really good scent to it. It smells like cloves I'll think of the word here in a minute. This one gets about 11 inches tall, very easy care. Looks, hummingbirds like it. It's a long bloomer, but I like it because it has this dark red flower with this blue, silvery blue foliage. That contrast can really pop out into in your garden if everything's kind of the same shade of green. It does like moist, well-drained soils. It's drought tolerant, yahoo, pest resistant. It can be used as a cut flower, and they're not too big for this, but there's a whole American Pie series, and this one happens to be cherry pie. They don't flop over. That's one of the reasons they've bred this one. It has long-lasting cut flowers. Let's see, I think I read that twice. Okay. Yep. It did get the RHS Award of Garden Merit at the Chelsea Flower Show in New England, or in England, not New England, England. So it's a pretty good pedigreed plant over here. So try cheddar pinks. They're fun, but American pie, cherry pie will be one that will probably do well in your garden. I feel like a commercial. Bleeding heart. I like bleeding hearts, and they bloom from late spring to early summer. They're only about 12 inches tall with about an 18-inch spread. This one is a white with a light pink. You can see right here that there's just a little touch of pink on the ends of the hearts. This one likes part shade in a moist, well-drained soil. Don't we all like a moist, well-drained soil? It is deer resistant. So if you have deer, plant some bleeding hearts. It's very hardy to zone 3, so we're okay there. You might find that the foliage kind of dies back in the summer, and that's okay. It'll, oops, it just says it won't go dormant in the summer if you water it consistently. Mine tends to go away. I'm not a good plant parent. It's a very compact dwarf kind of shrub. It can even be used as a ground cover if you have that much room. It's deer and rabbit resistant, apparently, from the verbiage. But this one is called white gold, and I like the foliage on this one. I don't know that in our climate it will be as yellow as it is. I've seen lots of pictures of it where it's a little bit more green, maybe this chartreusey green with these pure white drops of flowers on there. But it is dazzling as it is the contrast between the yellow and the white. This one blooms from April to May. It thrives in damp, slightly shaded spots and will shine out of the darkness. Ooh. If you have a dark spot, you might want to plant bleeding heart in there to kind of lighten up that edge. Gets about 30 inches tall with a 24-inch spread. This one picture happens to be from Thomson Morgan, which is out of England. They don't really ship over here, but they have a really good catalog. And sometimes they'll ship seeds over to us. This is wood fern. I have never seen wood fern with this kind of foliage coloring on it. It's called Jurassic Gold. It requires the shade. It's also disease and pest resistant. It's also resistant to deer. But it comes out in the spring foliage comes out as this orangey yellow and turns green as it ages a little bit. Let's see. They emerge golden orange and the fronds fade to a golden yellow, eventually turning green with age. And then you cut back the dead fronds in the winter. Again, the Rural Horticultural Society Award of Garden Merit winner from last year. So it will probably not turn gold in the fall, but you'll have that bright burst of color in the springtime, which I think is kind of unique for a fern. Coneflowers. Apparently we've all loved coneflowers at one time because there was, back in the early aughts, the coneflower mania, there was like 50 million varieties. But this is Pretty Parasols, and I liked it because it wasn't a harsh color, and it has that typical coneflower shape with the petals kind of reflexed. It is a hybrid. It's probably a hybrid between Purpurea and Pallidida. But I don't know that for sure, just from the shape of the flowers. Let's see. It needs full sun. It prefers deadheading if you like to do that. It gets about 36 inches tall. It's pollinator friendly. Even the birds will come and take the seeds out and eat the seeds for you. And that's probably why it's not very prolifically produced in the garden. It does bloom from July to November. So they kind of give that, it doesn't like bloom all at one time. So it gives you a long season of flowers on that plant. So look for Pretty Parasols out there in the garden center, and then look for Sweet Sandina, which is another type. This one has, and sometimes I'm a sucker for green flowers. But I like the fact that these petals are kind of a little bit up. They look like a little a open umbrella. And this one's from Terra Nova Nurseries. It's hardy to zone 4, and this one will pollinate. This one will be pollinator magnets from July through October. So it does have that long season where it keeps producing flowers for most of the summer and fall. Here's dewdrops. This is corabels, and corabels sometimes are good for their flowers, and sometimes we grow them just for the foliage. But this will give you a little bit of a pink and white sparkle into your garden. They do have the bright coral red flowers that stand out against the foliage, against this lighter pink, and they have that blue-green leaf. So this is kind of a different corabelle that we may see, or heuchera, out there. And this one's pretty small. It only gets 14 to 16 inches tall, so it's a shorter little plant. And then we go to the teeniest of tiniest little plants. This is Lucky Mouse. And if you are any type of hosta aficionado, you know that the mouse series is the smallest. This one's only 5 inches tall. They look much bigger in the picture. So yeah, 5 inches tall. They get about 12 inches wide. I like the fact that the cream and the the cream edging, yellow edging along the leaves, and these little teeny tiny flower spikes. I think even with the flowers, they don't get much more than 8 inches tall. Tolerates everything that you might want to know about. It needs some shade. It likes part shade to shade. It's moist, well-drained soil. It's cold hardy. It'll grow here just fine. But the mouse ear leaves are the ones that kind of cup up a little bit. Let's see. Full to dappled shade areas of beds. You can add a little sparkle in there. It's a sport of 1 Lotta Supreme. So if you know what that one is, that one's probably a solid leafed color. But here's Lucky Mouse. Okay. Kind of go to a different spectrum. Here's lavender. This is Twin Summer. And twins, it took me a while to figure out what was unique about this plant. And basically, it's the fact that these little petals on this lavender plant are variegated. They're purple and white. And that's not just a reflection on the photographer, because I was like, what's wrong with these? Again, lavender is a bee magnet. Butterflies love it. They love borders and containers. The problem in our area is it gets too wet in the winter. The trick to grow good lavender is to get a flat rock, usually out of a creek, and you want to kind of put that around the base of your plant, leaving a hole for the stem, but that way it sheds the water away from that crown of the root system. Or if you want to put it under the eave of a building, that works too, but you need to kind of shed that water away from the root system in the wintertime. Likes it very, very dry. And some of these are, edible. So sometimes you can put the petals in, it says salads or pancakes, or crystallize them for cake decoration. So some of these are, edible flowers too. But I had never seen a lavender with variegated flowers. So try Twin Summer. And I really want you all to kind of let me know if you've tried some of these and they work, because I can't plant all these in my garden. So I'm kind of giving it out there to you to try these out. Lilies. I think lilies kind of get a bad rap because they're loved by rabbits everywhere. So if you can grow them, if you've got a rabbit runner or a dog or something that keeps the rabbits out, this one's pretty good. This one gets about 4 feet tall, so it's a taller plant. And the flowers kind of bend down a little bit, so they're an Aurelian hybrid of lilies. And they have this distinctive trumpet form, and they have a very intense perfume. So that's kind of why I like lilies in the garden. You can really tell when they're there. They prefer cool, rich soil, which argues for shade at their feet, and low-growing ferns and geraniums and hellebores. They do need about 6 to 8 hours a day, and they're planted from bulbs. So yeah, try this Beijing Moon Lily from White Flower Farm. Okay, usually at this point I'd say, do I have any questions? But we're moving on. We're going to go to woody plants. Woody plants have a woody stem that persists for many years, allegedly, if we can get them to continue on. So this is our shrubs, our trees, some things that make a little bit of a permanence in our gardens. So we've got false cypress pinpoint blue from Proven Winners. And this one looks to be kind of it's a native species. It's not native to Kentucky. It's native to the Pacific Northwest. So depending on where you define your native. It does get 20 feet tall, but it's very columnar, and it only gets 6 feet wide. So if you want that narrow, straight up and down look. This is probably a evergreen plant that you might want to try. It's deer resistant. It does well in containers. If you move that container into something to overwinter it in the fall, it won't really last well in a container above the ground. Let's see. It adds a good structure. It gives you that upright focal point. It's deer resistant. It requires no maintenance, but does need superb drainage. So don't plant it in a low-lying area. It does not like wet feet. And after the rainstorm we've had this week, nothing likes wet feet. So this is another option if you're looking for something that's an upright columnar, focal point in your garden. There's a new dogwood on the market, but this one's cornicusa, which is, I think, a Chinese dogwood. This one gets between 15 and 30 feet tall with about that much of a spread. And this is a white to pink brack. It needs full sun to part shade, probably use a little bit of shade here in this part of the country. It has good fall color. Butterflies like it. It's showy and it's edible fruit, although you have to be kind of hungry to eat it. It's tolerant of deer. The blooms appear a little bit later than our Corna Florida, our flowering dogwood, because you can see that this one blooms when there's leaves out, and they hold their flowers up above the leaves. So you'll get a pretty good flower display. These little pointed bracts don't overlap as you see in some dogwoods, and it gives you that starry shape for up to 8 weeks. I don't think it's going to be 8 weeks in Kentucky. We get too hot too fast for a lot of these. But this one might be a good dogwood to try if you're having a hard time with common dogwood in your garden. But I kind of like the pink color. I haven't seen a pink Kusa dogwood lately. Now, don't hate me for putting Forsythia in the presentation. I do kind of like Forsythia. They're kind of like the harbingers of spring, because when the Forsythia bloom, spring's finally gotten here. But this one you can have yellow all year round, because this one actually has variegated foliage. So after the flower, I couldn't get a picture of it actually out of flower, but so you see the flowers down here on the bottom of the stem. Well, the foliage is yellow with just a little bit of green in the middle. Can you believe that? I cannot. So it's drought tolerant. I mean, Forsythia does well here. It gets over 36 inches tall. That's all it said, over 36 inches. The cool thing about Forsythia is after it blooms, you can cut it down and it'll grow back from the root system just fine. They're pretty vigorous. It says put it on 6 feet centers, which I think it'll probably mean that it'll get about 6 feet wide. They do have, you can kind of get those arching stems to be a good foundation shrub or a mass planting on a slope, or even in a larger flower bed. So yeah, this was, believe it or not, from Gardener's Confidence. We'll see if that one kind of lasts as long as it should. I think it'll be kind of an interesting point. So here's a smooth hydrangea. This one's Invincible Garnetta, which is a red mop head pink flowers, Invincible. So this one boasts supportive, sturdy stems, so that the blooms don't fall over. A useful compact size and blooming ability for months instead of mere weeks. Okay, that is all propaganda. Take that with a grain of salt. It blooms a bit later than the rest of the Invincible series, and it's a fantastic season extender. Okay, let's see. Blooms every year, even in cold climates, which means that it probably blooms on new wood. Flowers are held up tight. Silvery pink, ruby red flowers are perfect for the summer landscape. It's a continuous or rebloomer. It blooms for a long period of time, and you don't have to deadhead. And it's native to North America. Actually, it's native to the eastern part of North America. It only gets about 30 inches tall and 30 inches wide. Let's see. Blooms on new wood. Yep. Blooms summer through fall. Very hardy, from 3 to 8. Awesome. So they recommend a minimum of 6 hours of sun for the best flowering ability in hot climates. Woohoo! That's where we are. A little bit of shade is recommended. Let's see. Awesome. So that's a North American native that's been picked and selected. for its continuing bloom. Now, if you're not really into mop heads, they also have a lace cap variety of Invincible. This one's called Invincible Lace, and it's a smooth hydrangea. It's the first rebloom. Oh, hold on, let me get to the propaganda here. Very hardy. It gets 5 feet tall, so it's a little taller. It's the first ever smooth hydrangea with purple lace caps. And lace caps are the only ones that actually have the pollen. The mop heads don't have very much pollen in them for the bees and the butterflies, or so says the description. And they're strong and they'll stay upright, and they're very much the same color as the mop heads that we had just seen. So this is also from proven winners. Another shrub that you might want to try in your garden if you have a little bit of a wet spot is Itea. This one's Fizzy Mizzy. And the difference between this one and our regular, just plain old Itea virginica is that the flowers are upright. They're upright little spikes. Mostly the Iteas that I see, the sweet spires, they have like kind of droopy flower inflorescences or flowers. They come in abundance. It blooms. It's highly floriferous. It's high blooming. It can go into a container. It can go into a any spot in the garden. It does well in full sun or shade. It tolerates a wide range of soils, including wet locations. It naturalizes well, and it does form dense colonies. So be aware that if you have a wet spot, it's going to shoot up little suckers out of the ground, and you'll have a mass planting fairly quickly. This one only gets 2 to 3 feet tall, so it's one of those little shorter ones. And I put this other picture in the this red picture in there because that's the fall color. If you need some really good fall color, Iteas are awesome for that, especially in a wet site where you can't grow. You may not be able to find much else to grow. Okay. Oh, crab apples. I love crab apples. And they've replaced my favorite one with this one. This one's Showtime. My favorite one is Prairie Fire, which is also a red-leafed, dark red flowering with very small fruit crabapple. But this one says it turns the branches into columns of color, which it can do. This one is also a little bit, has a vibrant fall color that kind of turns this orange, fiery orange color. It is an invaluable wildlife source for food and nectar. Usually they're covered in bees in the spring, bees and butterflies, and then the birds will eat the fruit, usually after a couple of hard freezes. It gets 300 inches tall. You can do the math on that. I think it's 20 feet maybe. I can't do that in my head right now, and I did not translate that. It blooms on old wood, so you want to be careful pruning it in the early spring because it does bloom before most of the leaves come out. It's a really good specimen tree or focal point, and it's very, it's a showstopper. It will definitely stop traffic when it blooms, as will Prairie Fire. So here's Showtime. It's a little bit more disease resistant than our Prairie Fire crabs. I'm not sure about this one. I put it in there because it's a shrub that kind of gives you some spring color and some fall color. And apparently the butterflies love this. This is Indian Hawthorn. And I think in the right spot, it can do fairly well. It's got that early spring red color coming out. It has the spring flowers that come out in the early summer. And then it kind of has a fall red color, but it's resistant to black spot, and that's kind of why I picked it, because sometimes black spot can wipe this one out. And it's an evergreen shrub, so I think in a protected location you could probably put this one in here. I myself have not grown this, but it says it looks good in a mixed bed of companion plants. Salt tolerant if you're on the coastal plain, which we are way far away from the coastal plain. Now, this is a knockout rose. This is not your typical knockout rose. This is Petite Knockout. This one only gets, let's see, 12 to 18 inches tall. It is a true miniature rose that you can add into your flower beds as a perennial. And it doesn't require all of the pruning that a lot of our knockout roses need. I don't, there wasn't much to say except that it's a knockout. It's a red knockout. I have a feeling they're going to be coming out with more colors. As the red one is probably easier to find than any of the other colors. So if you try this little red knockout rose, let me know how it goes, because there's not enough little petite roses in there. Although it does not say anything about disease resistance or mite resistance or anything of that sort. So I think it looks cute in a pot. I think it would be great as a Mother's Day gift or a, Valentine's Day gift, which we've passed Valentine's Day for. Oh, lilacs. Oh, I got to go. Okay. So here's a white lilac, new age. This one gets over 36 inches tall, but I've never seen a white lilac before. So try this one, new age white. For this one, it's hardy to zone 4, so we should be okay. It does have mildew resistant foliage on this one. Okay, we have come to the end of our woody plants, and we're going to talk about All-American selections. All-American selections have been tested across the United States for their uniqueness and their reliability in growing across the United States. So if you don't know what to grow, look for the All-American selections. And you can tell that by the, this is their new logo, if you haven't seen it out there. Now, we've had a lot, we started with Celosia. Now here's a Celosia that actually has flowers on it. And this one's is Candela pink, so it has the plume type foliage on it. It does get 30 inches tall. It has a good cut flower. It just keeps blooming all season. This is an annual, remember. And All-American selections have to be able to be grown from seed for that. And then there's the All-American, if you just Google All-American selections, they have their own website. But we have an All-American selection test garden at Lexington and the Arboretum on UK's campus. So if you wanted to kind of just peruse and see what's out there, there's no names on there. You won't be able to tell. But they test them for 3 years to see which ones rise to the top. And they're judged by judges across the nation, actually. You could use this in a mixed planting or mass planting or just general garden use. And you can dry this one, and it makes a great dried flower. We don't see there's a flower section and there's an edible section. There's always a tomato, so if you're always looking for the new tomato. But this is the first time a scallion, not a scallion, what is it? It's a shallot. I'm sorry. I was like, it's not a scallion, it's a shallot. This is the first shallot to ever win a designation, but it's a very pretty little shallot. It doesn't have as much, it's not as hot as an onion, but it has really sweet taste when you caramelize it in cooking. And it has a mild shallot-like flavor when you cook it raw or when you eat it raw. It's easy. Apparently you can grow them from seed because it's pretty easy. And then they're easy to peel. Bulbs and single-centered bulbs have that bright coppery pink outer skin with those rosy purple thick rings. They have a slight citrusy flavor when eaten raw, and when caramelized, things get better as the natural sugars are enhanced and do not leave an overpowering aftertaste. So apparently it's an easy variety for home growers as well as fresh and for market growers. So you might be able to see this one at your local garden center this year, but that's a shallot. Shasta Daisy, Sweet Daisy Birdie is the perennial winner this year. We can grow this one. You don't have to, deadheading is recommended, but you don't have to stake it, but it gets about 24 inches tall. It makes this really nice moundy pattern. Those blooms are about 5 inches across. It's pollinator friendly. Let's see. Has long-lasting blooms and carefree longevity in the gardens down to zone 3. It's food and habitat for multiple kinds of pollinators. It's a medium height, so it's not too tall or too short in the garden. If you have a moonlight garden or have a garden that you only can visit at night like I do, you might want to try some white flowers so that you can see those in the evenings. You can deadhead it or not, but it's not necessary. They'll continue to bloom for a longer period of time. Hot peppers. This one's called Potapeño, which I thought was hilarious. I want to be able to name something really cool. But you can grow these to the green stage or the red stage. And they're not as, they do have a jalapeno fruit that's traditionally spicy, but not too hot. They're small enough to grow into a container. So they're, you want a 10 to 12 inch container, but they get about 12 to 18 inches tall. They have about 50 days to harvest for green fruit and 65 days for red. It's a compact plant, so it's not going to get very tall on you. The fruit hangs down beneath the plant to make it very easy to harvest without damaging the appearance or the productivity. So if you've got it in a hanging basket, it's easy to pick for that. So you could do this on the patio. You can do this in a balcony. You can do this. You can plant this hot pepper just about anywhere. And then we've got squash. Squash is fun. This is Goldilocks. I'm not sure who eats squash, but if you do, this would probably be a good one for you. These are 4-inch rounds. Although they look like pumpkins, they're not, but they're powdery mildew tolerant. That's one of those diseases that squash get a lot. This one had high yield, had disease tolerance, had a rich nutty flavor. It was the Goldilocks of, I'm sorry, it was the Goldilocks of the squash in the competition as they tasted it. So I think that's why I got named Goldilocks. And then zinnias. I love zinnias because they do provide that little spot of color that you need. This one's a bicolor, which is fun. Small, compact plants, 8 to 14 inches tall. They bloom from late spring to summer and to fall. They are there all the time. As they start out red and yellow, and then they fade to kind of an orange, apricot, and pink shades. These are 2.5-inch blooms, so these are kind of big for a zinnia, at least for this kind of profusion zinnia. They do well in baskets. They do as a low edger. They're cute. It's a gold medal winner. And they're pretty eye-catching at that point. They also won the Flora Select Gold Medal in the European trials too. So it's a well-rounded awarded group. Now, that's the end of my presentation, and I want you to go try some of these things